Good morning, team. I'm Sergeant Jones. I'll be giving you a brief today on servant leadership. This briefing is unclassified, so feel free to take notes and discuss it with your battle buddies, educate them on servant leadership. Today I'll be covering how long servant leadership has been around, some famous examples of servant leaders in our past, what a servant leader is, 10 characteristics of servant leadership, and what are some qualities and practices that we may see or that we can do ourselves as servant leaders. So, how long has servant leadership been around? It seems like the new seasonal coffee at Starbucks, right? Everyone's talking about it. You know, you hear that change of commands, change of responsibilities. You know, everyone's talking about it from, platoon sergeant level all the way up to, command sergeant majors. You hear them talking about it in generals, of course. You hear everyone talking about servant leadership. So I'm going to give you some famous examples of people in the past that were servant leaders. You had people like Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and Martin Luther King Jr. So those are just examples that way you can put one and two together what a servant leader is and who were servant leaders. That way, if you know who they are and you follow them at all, you can see that what they practice was servant leadership. So what is a servant leader? I like to look at Dr. King's example as an example of servant leadership. Dr. King offered an inclusive vision. He listened carefully to others and persuaded a nation to reason. He healed our divisions while also building a community and also building our nation for the better. And so he's a servant leader in my mind because he didn't do it just for himself. He did it for everyone. He did it for an entire nation. He wanted to make an entire nation better and make our cohesion just super strong. And so, he's my favorite example of a servant leader, because regardless of how much he was hurt and how on all the threats he received, he always led by example. And, because a lot of people wanted to be violent at that time, because it was a very sensitive movement. So he's my favorite example of a servant leader. But what are some characteristics of being a servant leader? Those include listening, empathy, healing, awareness, persuasion, conceptualization, foresight, stewardship, commitment to the growth of people, and building a community. Exactly what Dr. King did. So what are some qualities and practices of a servant leader? So I wasn't going to go into the 10 characteristics like in their definitions because that would take a long time. But I have some practices and qualities that encompass all those characteristics, like patience and kindness. That ties into listening, empathy, being aware, healing our subordinates. So you can look at it this way. We say there's a 3-day weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We all come to Motor Pool Monday, and you just ask your Joes, how was your weekend? And as a servant leader, it's important to sit there and listen to what they're actually talking about, not just doodle on your phone. All right, next, how about you, specialist so-and-so? Don't just disregard what they're talking about, let it go in one ear out the other. Actually listen to your followers, because when you listen to them, you're going to pick up on things that you wish you knew. You're going to pick up on any issues they have going on in their life, or maybe fun activities they're doing, and that way you're aware of what's going on. And then as servant leaders, it puts us in a special position where we can see issues going on and we can help heal our soldiers. So as long as we're listening to our soldiers, they will, they'll feel comfortable, we'll gain their trust, and then, they'll be honest with us, and we can help them move on between either finding the resources to their issues or helping them, just if they just want to talk to you and vent to you about what their issues are, and then maybe you can help them yourself. So some other qualities that I like to see in servant leaders is respect, and humility. Humility is probably the biggest one because I'll give you a short story. So for humility, as servant leaders, we have to have humility. Now that doesn't mean as servant leaders we have to have low self-esteem. That's not what humility means to me as a servant leader. Humility to me as a servant leader means humbleness, being humble. As a servant leader, we have to be humble, because there's going to come that time when you get a soldier that they're going to know something more, they're going to know more than you on a particular subject. And my story is, so when I was a private, I was sent to Crow School, which is the commonly remotely operated weapons stations, like the one with the joystick and the Humvees. So I was sent to that school. I was like the only private, and I think one sergeant was sent to the school. We were the only ones in the whole company that went. That was fine and dandy. My leader, he was a servant leader. He wanted me to be better because he knew I would benefit the organization later on. He invested time into me, and I gave it back to him tenfold. I gave him everything I could. So I went to the school, I learned everything I could learn, that the Crow system can hold, the M2, Mark 19, 240 Bravo, and, the 249. So, it's a lot to learn because you have to know all the different pieces. So, we went to the school, came back, a year or so goes by, the company comes down on deployment orders. So and we have a whole chalk of vehicles with Crow systems on them. So it's only me and another sergeant that have the knowledge on how to operate the system. So we had to split up the company. So it was me, PFC Jones at this point. They had to split up. So I took first platoon, half a second, and then Sergeant Butcher, she took the rest of second, and then all of third platoon. And we taught them. We came up with a lesson plan. We taught them, and it wasn't just the privates and the drivers that were in these courses. It was the entire company, because you never know who's going to be sitting behind that weapon station. So I was teaching sergeants, I was teaching staff sergeants this class, and here's the point. Here's where it comes to that humility. As servant leaders, they had that humility, that humbleness to sit through a PFC's class and learn from it. They showed general interest in what I had to teach them, because this was good information I was going to give them. And yeah, they took it and ran with it. They had good questions. They were eager to learn from me. That shows me respect, which is another big part of it. They gave me the respect I deserved as, a PFC, because I was giving a vital asset back to the organization. Back when my team leader invested that time into me, he sent me to school, and look how it paid off. By him investing his time into me as a soldier early on, I was able to benefit an entire unit before they got deployed. So I was able to teach them about the Crow system. So, you have to have humbleness when you have a younger soldier that might know more on a particular subject than you. Just sit there, actively listen what they have to tell you. So, that's just servant leadership in a brief nutshell for you. I think servant leadership is, one of the best leadership styles. But just to go over what we went over today. So we talked about how long servant leadership has been around and why it's increasing in popularity. We talked about some famous examples of servant leaders. We talked about what a servant leader is by me giving you the example of Dr. King. And we talked about some qualities and practices of a servant leader. So at this time, do I have any questions? What is that, Sergeant Cobb? You have a question? Sergeant Cobb's question was, Sergeant, what practices of servant leadership are most important to you? To me, Sergeant Cobb, my most important practices would be to lead by example. So that says, so I always found something wonky was my dad would always say, do as I say, don't do as I do. I thought that was kind of weird. So for us as servant leaders, we need to lead by example. We need to, show them the standard, show them what's right. And because what would be the point of just telling them what's right and then we get to do something else? That's not really, that's not fair to ourselves and to our subordinates. So we need to lead by example, show them the standard. Any other questions? Sergeant King, you got a question? Is servant leadership the best style of leadership? Sergeant King, thank you for that question. I think it's the best form of, or style of leadership because, like I said, it builds cohesion within the unit, and it benefits everybody around you because everyone feels respected, the morale's boosted, there's a ton of motivation. So I think you get the most out of servant leadership, in my opinion. Any other questions? All right, that'll conclude my class today. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.